I'm not a fan of the notion of vibe coding. I know that there's a lot of people that are really, really say this is going to be the way we're going to be building stuff in the future. As somebody that runs such a important operational system, and that's what we really are running here is we're running systems. I think it's really important for all of our engineers to understand the systems that they're building. And you only do that by then reading through and understanding the code that's generated. And you can't remove that from the equation, not yet, at least, in my opinion.
This is DevOps Paradox, episode number 339. DNS is old tech, and that's why it still runs the internet. Welcome to DevOps Paradox. This is a podcast about random stuff in which we, Darren and Victor, pretend we know what we're talking about. Most of the time, we mask our ignorance by putting the word DevOps everywhere we can and mix it with random buzzwords like Kubernetes, serverless, CI/CD, team productivity, islands of happiness, and other fancy expressions that make us sound like we know what we're doing. Occasionally, we invite guests who do know something, but we do not do that often since they might make us look incompetent. The truth is out there, and there is no way we are going to find it. P.S. It's Darren reading this text and feeling embarrassed that Victor made me do it. Here are your hosts, Darren Pope and Victor Farsick. Victor, what do you think the true building blocks of the internet are?
Like true, like the most important building blocks.
Yes.
TCP, torrent, and blockchain.
In that order?
I mean, historical order, kind of calendar order, yes. In order of appearance.
I cannot believe the B word crossed your lips. That just sounds like a horrible thing to me. But TCP, yeah, okay. Well, that sounds good. I'm going to have to disagree with you. TCP, yes, because TCP underlies one of these other things. I think DNS is a big deal, even though that's not TCP. That's UDP.
You're saying that torrent does not matter?
I'm saying torrent hasn't mattered since LimeWire and Napster.
Since Netflix.
Yeah. Okay. Whatever. Maybe asking why we're asking all these questions. Well, on today's show, we have Anthony Eden on from DNSimple. Anthony, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Do you agree or disagree with Victor that blockchain is one of the most important building blocks of the internet?
I'm going to have to disagree on that one. Sorry, Victor.
Are we not going to write internet on ledgers now? Whoa. I'm confused.
So,
I thought that you're a forward-thinking person.
Maybe the next internet.
Next one. Okay.
We can go on that a little bit. But the current one they have definitely is UDP, TCP, protocols like that. The old stuff, the stuff that's been around for a while.
And guess what? That stuff is going to be around for a long while, even during this, how shall I say, AI insanity? Can we have AI without TCP and UDP?
I mean, you can, but I don't see it being anywhere near as valuable in a non-networked world. But hey, who am I?
Obviously, we'll have to get into AI a little bit
Yes.
more. But Anthony is actually the founder and CEO at DNSimple. And of course, you took on immediately because somebody saw back in the late 2000s, because we can say that, somebody saw a great value of this and they automatically threw $1 billion, right?
No, not at all.
Wow. I mean, it was right after the dot bomb of 2000. I mean, everybody had billions of dollars laying around.
Yeah, they didn't throw it my way.
Okay. Why not? Was it just too simple?
I don't. Part of it is I think it was old. It's old tech, right? Like the first round of people doing domains and DNS, they were around in the 90s essentially, including myself. I was actually part of one of the first domain registrars during the deregulation of .com. I was in the CTO of one of the first 7 registrars. And so we were doing a lot of this stuff even back in late 90s, early aughts. So by the time 2010 rolled around, when I started DNSimple, essentially we were moving from the early phase, so group 1 that had built a lot of the foundations for the internet, to the next sort of phase of DNS and domain management. And that's where DNSimple started up. But there was really no money coming, at least to me. I do have a pretty large competitor that you've probably heard of, somebody called Cloudflare. They got a ton of money to take them. So they took that route with the VC funding. I intentionally wanted to build a business that was not a funded business, that was built off profits, and one that was stable and could support the lifestyle that I wanted to have with my family.
Wait, that is saying that businesses should generate profit now. Well, first, you're against Bitcoin being building block. Now we need to generate profit. Kind of, what's next?
I'm just a contrarian. What am I going to... I imagine businesses are there to be good things that generate profit for their owners and shareholders. But what do I know, right?
It's interesting that you brought up Cloudflare. And I'm thinking back, okay, end of 2025, they were down a couple of times, or caused half the internet to be down. It used to be AWS to bring down half the internet. Now it's Cloudflare that brings down the other half of the internet. If AWS and Cloudflare ever go down, we're all taking a break, I guess.
Yeah.
But I haven't heard anything about DNSimple ever going down. Okay, I want to ask this question because DNSimple is a SaaS business without being a real SaaS business, but it is a SaaS business.
Yeah.
What does it take to run DNS for somebody else? I mean, we understand, okay, I need a DNS server. Great. Yeah, but then what?
Yeah, so a lot of it's about scale and distribution, right? So if you're running on the small scale, you have DNS servers on one or two machines. You're probably running it in unicast mode, which means that every machine has its own IP address and DNS packets are going in and out of those IP addresses directly to that machine. And so that's kind of the first phase that we see. As you start to scale up and as you want to distribute more nodes around the world to improve reliability, you switch to Anycast. You start building out a more redundant network. Now you have to distribute changes out to the various edges. And this is where things sort of cross over that line of, okay, I can do this just running a piece of software, to now I need services that connect all this stuff together and get the data out in a timely fashion and ensure that everything stays up and is actually synchronized correctly. So we spend a lot of our time building and maintaining a system that allows us to do that, which is to serve the same DNS responses from many different locations around the globe with the shortest possible path to that DNS server.
Does that mean that you need to be close to those destinations, or how does that work?
So generally, Anycast's the BGP routing protocol is going to try to find the shortest path to wherever basically they can find to the nearest node that broadcasts an IP address. And so, yes, your proximity to the actual resolver that's asking the question does matter. It's a little bit more complex because a lot of people go through public resolvers like Google's 8.8.8.8, or they go through 1.1.1.1. Or these are public resolvers that are run by organizations. Those also are running Anycast. So you kind of have this set of layers, almost like an onion, where you're starting from the outside. You're going to the closest resolver, then it wants to go to the closest authoritative name server to you. And so that's kind of how you get the fastest DNS queries, is by having an authoritative name server that's close to a resolver that's close to the person who's making the query.
I'm going to go down so many different rabbit holes here. I'm going to try to stay on one at the moment.
All right.
Okay, you brought up Quad 8, Quad 1.
Yep.
Which, by the way, that's Google, that's Cloudflare. When you set up an internet service at home, I'm sitting at home, and if I'm a nobody and I don't know what I'm doing, I'm just going to be using the ISP's DNS. They're going to be providing that. If I'm somewhat technical, I may do the Quad 8 or the Quad 1. Why would I not want to do any of those things? What is the right way to set up DNS at home?
Well, the good news is that there's no right or wrong. The best way is the one that works for your needs. Most people, like you said, they're going to use the ISPs, and a lot of ISPs these days will just use 8.8.8.8 or Cloudflare. So they'll just send that out. If you are doing something a little bit more advanced and you either want to control privacy, because every time that you connect to one of those resolvers, that resolver now knows what question you're asking, and it's collecting all that data together. And that data is being used by the companies that run those resolvers to make decisions like, oh, okay, well, we see more traffic coming from this region, therefore we're going to invest in that region. Or we don't see as much traffic come from here, so we won't grow future investments there. They're also using it to do security analysis. Oh, we see these types of queries coming from these locations. What are we going to do about that? If you want to avoid somebody else looking into that information, then you can run your own DNS servers at home, which more techie people that want to have, say, a little home lab will set up a Raspberry Pi running a little bit of a DNS server on it, a lightweight DNS server, and they'll do the resolver part from their internal network. It's the same kind of thing you would have seen in sort of older, small corporate networks where they would have set up their own DNS server, often running on Microsoft software, Active Directory or something like that, and they would resolve all the queries starting from inside their own network. So still totally doable to this day. And a lot of folks who are into tech and who like to tinker will set something like that up just so that they can feel a little bit more comfortable about their privacy and about the information that they're sending out.
Until their significant others figure out, why can't I get to the website I'm trying to get to?
Well, we won't even talk about that. That is another use case that's actually pretty common, which is basically privacy blockers in the other direction, or not really privacy blockers, but content blockers. So corporate networks, often they will install name servers and use DNS as the first point to try to stop people from accessing sites they don't want them to access.
That goes down a very, very dark rabbit hole we're not going to go down.
Yes.
Now, one of the things that DNSimple has is domain registration. Again, you said you were at the time, the CTO at a company during the great deregulation of the .com away from network solutions.
Yes.
Right? That was it. So if you wanted a domain prior to, what year was that?
99?
9. Okay. Right when everything hit the fan. Almost hit the fan.
Almost.
That's when things were warming up to hit the fan.
Yes.
Now that we can get domains pretty much anywhere and get all sorts of top-level domains, TLDs, I'm thinking about going back to the AI thing. We've seen all these AI startups come along. Of course, they're going to want to get a domain name. What are people doing wrong when they're trying to get a domain name today, do you think? They're thinking through, it's like, oh, okay, forget the marketing part of it. It's like, are people doing silly things when they're getting a domain name?
Yes. So the first example would be, and it's not really that it's silly, it's just they don't really know when they need to level up. So for example, you have some fairly high profile domains that will run on their domain registrars DNS servers that are not really, like the registrar in that case is not DNS first. So they've taken something that's 24/7, 365, the most important, valuable operational element that they have for their essentially presence on the internet, and they put it on something that wasn't really designed to operate in that fashion. And so there's a point where it's fine when you start. Like, you register a domain, you're just starting out, it doesn't really matter. But the minute that you actually have production traffic running through things, you need a production system that can make sure that you maintain the uptime, make sure that you have the distribution, fast response times, and generally domain registrars, especially older ones that maybe you're comfortable with, but who haven't really moved forward with the times, aren't going to have the infrastructure needed on the DNS side to run the operational portion. And that's a big mistake. The other big mistake I think that people make is that they don't put the proper security in place to ensure that they're not going to lose that domain in the future. So for example, they'll register an account with a shared login with other people from their company because there's no multi-user access control on a lot of the older registrars. And so that we've seen problems where people will just be like, well, I have this domain and somebody left my company and now no one can access it. What do I do? So there's some pretty big challenges that when we don't think through the security posture and the protection posture on domains, which are essentially intellectual property. So they should be treated like such.
I think one of the things that I've seen most of the time, going back to those DNS providers that aren't meant to do or aren't built to do DNS, I think of like a lot, not all, but some of the shared web hosting providers.
Yes.
To me, that's just a classic. And I'm not saying they're not, and I'm not saying they are, but it's like that would make sense because they're focused on running to the bottom of the barrel from a money perspective. So something's going to give somewhere. And
correct. Yeah, I see that. We see that as well. I see it where, for example, you have hosting control panels that will let you spin up instances of DNS servers. So you could say, well, I'll just spin up an instance of a DNS server for myself. It will work, but if that instance goes down, essentially it takes everything down with it, your web presence. And so that's a good example of it as well from the operational side. And that's how I separate these two things. I usually think of DNS as having the two sides. One is the operational side and one is the intellectual property side. Both need to be sort of set up and maintained in a good, reliable fashion.
How does that intellectual side works in practice from the legal point? Kind of, okay, I take your domain, you sue me. Are we talking now about, I don't know, a couple of years process, or how does that work even?
So generally you have egregious abuses of intellectual property. So that means somebody trying to squat the domain name from a company that clearly has a trademark. And
like Coca-Cola stuff.
Yeah, actually, there's well-defined processes. There's an organization called ICANN that oversees The majority of at least the generic TLDs that we have on the internet, both the old and new, so that's com.net.org, as well as all the new ones like app and all these other names. So there are very well-defined processes if somebody tries to take a trademark domain, and you can basically say, nope, that's ours, and you go through that. And that's pretty easy. In fact, so much so that they have short timelines in terms of months or less. Now, if you have a squabble between founders who both had access to a domain and they're fighting over it, well, that's a whole nother ball of wax, right? Because technically the company should own the IP, but if it wasn't properly put into the company holding, it may be under one of the founders' identities, and they'll say, no, that's mine. Look, it's in my account. I have all the information on it. I'm the registered domain holder, because they never switched it over to the company to be the registered domain holder. It's still a person, and that person now is the one that owns it. And then you can get in a protracted legal fight with that pretty easily.
Hey, Victor, you still own the DevOpsParadox.com domain, and I have everything else.
I'll
Thanks, Anthony. You gave me something
to.
Okay. Right.
You should fix that.
We should fix that.
Yeah, because it's so obvious that it's going towards $1 billion company that we should be worried. Yes.
Yeah, there we go.
First $10 already entered the account, eh?
There we go. Okay, so let's assume a person got the domain name right, and they picked DNS correct. DNSimple is obviously one of those. Mm-hmm. I would say probably most of the big hyperscalers are probably pretty good at this.
Yep.
Like AWS Route 53, all the others, those are all good. And let's assume that they actually get the IP address set up correctly for their website.
Right.
What else are they screwing up when they're actually setting up DNS? Or what are they forgetting that they really should have?
The big common one are things around email deliverability. So especially in this day and age where email is the most common asynchronous communication for businesses to communicate with their customers, often they won't go through the steps necessary to set up DMARC, which is essentially a way to define a policy for how you deal with spam. SPF, which makes sure that you're sending from the right senders, that only authorized senders can send email on behalf of a domain. And DKIM, which is essentially a signing algorithm so that you can actually say these messages are signed from their origin, which means that they are coming from who we expect they are coming from and they're not tampered with. So these are the types of things that I often see aren't necessarily set up correctly. The other thing is often just sort of change management processes on DNS. So they'll set up something manually through an interface, but they'll have no record of why. Why did we do this? Well, some service over here asked me to add a text record that I add, and I did that 5 years ago. Should I remove it? Does anything need it? And so we see a lot of that as well, where there is sort of chaos in the DNS records that are operational because there's no record of why anything was done.
Yeah, I'm thinking about pretty much every domain name I own is pretty much that way.
Yeah, and we dealt with that in two separate ways. One is with the obvious thing, notes. Like we basically made it so you could put notes attached to any record inside of DNSimple. As you're making changes, you can add a note and it will essentially keep a history of those notes. So that's one example. The other way we've seen people do it is they'll take their zones and they'll commit them into a source control like GitHub. And then they'll use their tools out there, open source tools. There's a variety of them that can actually then, when you change it and you make the commit to GitHub, it'll push those changes up to the various DNS providers where your zone is living. So we've seen that as well. And then finally, you have tools like Terraform or Ansible, and you can actually make domain management and DNS part of your configuration management with tooling like that as well.
I will go ahead and pull back one thing that I looked at your site is because even though I was familiar with the name, I'd really never looked at the actual site before. And I figured, okay, well, they do domain registration. So, okay, that makes sense. They do DNS hosting. That makes sense. And then I started looking. It's like, oh, wait, I can go into DNSimple and manage my domains and DNS at AWS and at Azure and at Google. What gives? Why are you being so nice?
Well, because we're I mean, look, that we're nice, but at the same time, we see a market opportunity, and there's a growing need for organizations to spread beyond a single cloud provider. So multi-cloud is a thing that happens. It's not everybody needs it, but when you need it, it's somewhat difficult to do when you've put all your eggs in one cloud basket. So for example, if you have an enterprise where you're putting everything onto AWS, that's really great. But the minute that you have to start moving things to another provider for reasons, whatever that may be, whether it's for redundancy, whether it's for functionality that's available in one and not the other, whatever it might be, then you'll find that you kind of run into a situation where things become more difficult. And in our space, in DNS, we know that we're not going to be, we don't have one cloud provider and we say we only support that. The goal is let's make it easier to go across various providers. And it's actually really common in DNS to spread a zone across multiple providers so that you have, again, more redundancy and the ability to shift things around easier. So we saw that as an opportunity and we decided to give a try at building what we call this domain control plane. And that's why we have the facilities to manage domains at other providers in addition to us.
I'll pull back the curtain. All of my domains are hosted. Let me rephrase that. All of my domains are registered at AWS.
Right.
The DNS hosting is somewhere else because I got tired of paying AWS. I got tired of paying the Route 53 costs every month. It's like I just got tired of it. So I think DNS hosted, depending on where the website was. So most of my stuff's either at Netlify or at Cloudflare. So I just use theirs, and it's like, okay, for what I'm doing, it's not like I've got, big requests per month. So it's not a big deal. But thinking through your part, it's like, okay, if I went to DNSimple, you were talking about the notes. It's like the note, if nothing else, at least I'd be able to know what's going on. Because I don't have API access directly to manage, even though I probably could at Netlify or at Cloudflare. Cloudflare I probably could.
Yeah.
So that seems like a very cool way of managing things. We were talking about all the email stuff. You're talking about records of what the heck is this? I'm going to ask one that's probably going to either set the internet on fire or not. Should websites have a www dot or no www?
That is a timeless question, isn't it? I am in the camp of no www. That's me personally. What we do is we just redirect the www over to the no www. So when I'm going around and I'm giving people DNSimple's address, I see DNSimple.com always. And that's what they go. Now, the irony is most people, at least in the last 15 years, would go, oh, DNSimple, open up Google, type in DNSimple and follow the path. Right now, they're like, oh, DNSimple. They open up ChatGPT, they type in DNSimple, and they try to follow the path. Although it's a little bit harder because there's not the same type of references via linking from ChatGPT. It's coming now more and more. But so people, like the domain names, even though it's underlined, most people on the internet are never actually typing that into their browser. They're putting into a search engine, or they're putting into a generative AI search engine.
Let's go there for a minute, because since you brought it up, how has that affected your business? I mean, obviously the links are sometimes there, sometimes not. What as a business owner, what's that like to you? It's
challenging because the traffic patterns, for example, from Google, when they introduced the Google AI summarization on top of search queries as being the first thing you see, if somebody in the past asked an informational query, we might show up in the first few results because we've spent a lot of time and energy to build really good documentation that explains not only what happens at DNSimple, but DNS in general. We have this very large knowledge base of support articles that explain each different record type. What do they mean? What are they for? Those queries now are just answered in the browser as part of the search result. Somebody doesn't have to go anywhere, or they're answered inside of ChatGPT or inside of Perplexity, or pick your AI tool of choice. So that means that the traffic has gone down. Now, the flip side of that is that the traffic that comes through is actually people that are interested more and more in the product itself. So we saw a dip in terms of signups after the introduction of these types of tools in the beginning of the year. And we've worked hard to attempt to overcome that. And we've actually seen now progress going the other direction, where we're starting to see an uptick in traffic, but the difference is now it's actually good traffic, more good traffic rather than just a lot of traffic bots following links off of search results and doing crazy stuff, right? These are actual people. And so in that sense, it was difficult to deal with, but I see some positives on the other side of it as well.
So you're not the CEO shaking, why are all our clicks down this month? Why aren't we getting more
Well, I may have been 6 months ago I was, but then we did the time to do the research to figure it out and understood, okay, now we see what's happening. Let's see what adjustments we want to make to improve the situation.
In running your company for roughly 15 years.
Yes.
I'm assuming you're up to maybe 400 or 500 people now. Does that sound about right?
For our team? No, not at all.
How many people do you have?
We're 20 people.
20.
Yes.
20 people to run a DNS solution and a registrar for the world.
Yes.
That's not possible. I'm sorry. That's just not possible. That's not how it works.
I can assure you it is. It absolutely is.
Why so small? I mean, why? I mean, sure, you probably could have grown some, but I mean, okay, I'm doing math. Okay, I'm happy it's 20, but it feels like 50 would probably be a little more sane. But is there just not that much support issues? Is it just because it's such a simple? Again, we're using simple a lot. Is it just because it's so simple and able to manage?
Let me translate what he's asking. He's okay with 20 engineers, but he thinks that you're missing 30 salespeople. I think that's where he's going with the number 50.
You kind of hit the nail right on the head there, because we are definitely an engineering heavy organization. So we have been since the beginning. I think we've run everywhere from 100% engineers to maybe 60-40. So 60% engineers, 40% non-engineers. Right now, I would say we're roughly 75-25. We don't have a big sales team. We never really have. It's been self-service. We have an engineering team that, in our case, we've focused on hiring really good engineers, but we've been very selective. So rather than trying to hire in quantity, we've focused on quality, and we've created an environment that is very, I guess I would say, friendly to engineers who are senior engineers who, for example, have families. So they have kids that they're trying to be with when they grow up. So rather than getting in the mindset of, oh, we're a startup, you have to be working 8 hours a week, and you get 1 week of vacation a year, and during that week of vacation, you have to have your phone and computer on you at all times. Instead, we're more along the lines of, okay, this is a business. Let's run it where you can legitimately take time off. We expect everybody to take 3 weeks at least off a year, if not more. And if you need to go out and take your kids to school, you take your kids to school, right? So we've created an environment that is, one, hiring high quality engineers, and then two, retaining those high quality engineers by actually creating an environment they want to work in and giving them problems they want to solve. So that's one of the ways that we've stayed small. We've grown a little bit over the years when we've needed to, but there's usually an inflection point where we say, okay, we're really missing something here. We need to add on people, and then we'll grow a few people and see how it works out. There's very much profit, like in growing based on our ability to pay our team members, not using debt or financing to do so.
So what's changing in that part of the world?
AI. We're gonna talk about AI. We know it's gonna happen, right? And so AI is empowering the engineers we have to continue doing more, but it's not really about more. I've been thinking a lot about this lately because I had spent a few years not writing any code. I was just in the role of CEO for the last few years. And just this year, I've started getting back into writing code again, really just taking off little bugs and fixing things that I don't want the team members to have to spend their time on, that are really well defined. And I've been thinking, what is it about these AI tools that we find advantageous in and how we do our work? And I realized that it's just giving me more time to think about problems and solutions rather than writing the code to solve the problems and solutions. And that's a big advantage when we can take because engineers, there are some engineers that love to actually write code. Like there's something beautiful about writing code and creating a working system. But a lot of engineers are far more interested in just solving problems. They like to see a tricky problem and they like to work through it. And so giving your brain more space to work through that, which in a lot of ways, delegating the actual code writing part out to a tool, I see that as very advantageous. And I'm seeing what some of our team members are able to do now that they have some of these tools in their hands that we couldn't have done 2 or 3 years ago without the same tools, without having more people and dedicating them to that.
Man, I'm so happy you're saying that, because in the last months, I entered into quite a few complicated conversations because I claimed that the value was never in you typing. The value was everything else. Typing in my head is chore. Kind of, we need it. There is value in it, but kind of it's simply like cleaning your house, right? I need to do it, but that's not really what generates value, right? And I feel that with AI, that's surfacing even more. I think that it was always present, but surfacing even more. Solving problems, figuring it out. That's the real job in a way.
One of the key things that I see still matters, though, is once you've solved the problem, it's really helpful if you understand the solution. And so, for example, I'm not a fan of the notion of vibe coding. I know that there's a lot of people that are really, really say this is going to be the way we're going to be building stuff in the future. As somebody that runs such a important operational system, and that's what we really are running here, is we're running systems. I think it's really important for all of our engineers to understand the systems that they're building. And you only do that by then reading through and understanding the code that's generated. And you can't remove that from the equation, not yet, at least, in my opinion.
Absolutely not. I mean, actually, you can. It's not that you cannot. It's just that the results between, I'm not going to call it vibe coding, I'm going to call it one shot. AI doing something and you being behind the steering wheel is just tremendous. If for no other reason, because whatever you told it to do, even if it's perfect, you really don't know what you want.
I'm a big fan of understanding the systems that I build and operate. By the way, humans can do just as much. They can do just as much to destroy the understanding of a system with manually written code as well. Believe me, as somebody who's written much of it, I can tell you, I have caused many a dragons in systems. And so this isn't saying that AI is not going to do that same thing, but it gives us more, it does it faster than we could do, thus giving us more time to think about it, to look at what it's trying to solve, and to retry it if it does something terrible. It's good stuff, in my opinion.
We were talking about AI, how it affects your work. Is there a story AI from the business perspective as well?
So in terms of like customer-facing AI?
Yeah, kind of like, does DNSimple or DNS in general, or will that be affected by AI? As a business, as a technology, as whatever you want to focus it on?
I think that there are already a few experiments on the IP side, more around sort of generating names based on ideas. So there's quite a few folks have written tools where you say, put a concept into one of the AI tools, and it will generate you a list of 10 to 15 domains that may or may not be available that are maybe good in that concept. And so we've seen that. It's an interesting experiment. I think that a lot of people search for a good name. So having ways to generate potentially good names, I think that's a good idea. More interesting will be as these types of tools get applied to the data that is potentially coming through, for example, in DNS at our edges. So for example, if it is, and we haven't done any of this yet, I don't see this in the foreseeable future because again, we have an operational environment to run. We have to focus on that first. But when the time comes, the tooling is that we're able to learn more about what is happening at our edges and train systems to generate potentially information about what's happening at our edges. When I talk about edges, I mean where we're getting the DNS queries in and sending the responses back out. That to me is something that we might see some interesting new techniques come out of. So it's a little hard right now. It's already being done with machine learning. It's been being done for years with machine learning. So generative AI might be just a different take on that.
I always thought it's very important, but now when we're talking, I started to think, how much does it matter to get a good domain? If you're going to be searched through Google and soon you will be found by, ChatGPT, how often do people actually really go to specific domain because you told them so? And when I say domain, I mean not the name, right? I know that, let's say it's called Victor. Google will find it if I type Victor without com.
Yeah, I think the answer to that comes based on how much competition you have for that name. So for example, imagine Victor. Victor.com, whoever has that, they're probably going to they've had it for a long time. So overcoming the age and history of that name in terms of search results or quality of the domain is going to be challenging. So that might be where the choice of name might matter because yes, you might be able to get victor.io or getvictor.biz, but it's probably going to take a lot longer to competitively rank in terms of search engines and also in generative AI search engines as well. Having said that, things are changing constantly with the models, with everything that's happening on all that, like with the competition between Google and OpenAI and Microsoft and everybody trying to figure out how they're going to make the next leap and these changing models. What I say today in terms of domain names might be very different a month from now.
We can probably guarantee that it will be different in a month from now.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. While you were talking, I actually came up with 3 questions. One that we didn't finish before. We were talking about the www earlier. Mm-hmm. You said you automatically do a redirect. Old school, that means I have to go and put in a redirect somewhere for that.
Yes.
That's something that you include, I guess, as a checkbox if you want it redirected?
Yeah. Well, we basically said we have a record type that's called a URL record, and we can say, I want to put this record on that redirects this other thing. And we have it set up so that you can say, I also want to have a Let's Encrypt certificate with it so that it actually hits the endpoint with an HTTPS termination and does the redirect so that you don't get into issues where, it's HTTP, therefore it's marked as insecure on the redirect. It's a subtle thing, but it's something that we've done for a long time that helps make that redirect work as well as possible in all browsers.
And as far as I know, nobody else is doing it. So where can I put in my credit card?
I think there's a few others that have started doing it, but DNSimple.com, that's where you put in your credit card.
But I don't know whether that's common or that's specific to you. I never thought about Let's Encrypt on that level. Kind of in my head, I'm always, I don't know, let's say my application is running Kubernetes, should be accessible through ingress, that domain, whatever. Let's Encrypt runs there, cool, kind of like easy busy. But is this you, or kind of, is that a common thing with DNS registrars? Kind of like, hey, Let's Encrypt is there, kind of no worries about it.
It has not been for a long time. I think some are starting to come around to the value of doing it. We've actually been supporters of Let's Encrypt since their inception. We were one of the earliest financial supporters of it. And even as a small company, we've continued because we believe that it's been really, really important for the internet as a whole. And so my CTO came to me many, many years ago and he said, we really should include Let's Encrypt certificates inside of DNSimple. And we found a way to do it where at the lowest tier, we could essentially, they're free. So you get them, you never pay for the certificate, but we had a way to encourage people to upgrade to our higher tier plans by supporting certain variations. For example, wildcard certificates would only be available on a higher tier. And so when we built the redirector in the first round of it, it didn't support HTTPS. It was only redirecting over HTTP. But when we were able to do both Let's Encrypt, and we were able to then say, well, this is interesting. We can now push these certificates automatically out to our redirector, and we found that it was really useful. So yeah, it's been super valuable to do it that way.
My second question, you were talking about edges a lot.
Yes.
How many edge points? See, I'm making up new terms here. It's not an endpoint, it's an edge point. How many do you have worldwide?
So as of today, we have 14 edges is how many we have today. So there are definitely bigger ones. Cloudflare is huge, by the way. Cloudflare has hundreds of them around the world because, again, they have those deep pockets to do it. But with 14, we've done fairly good coverage of Europe, Australia, US, and we're starting to go into South America now. The way we've designed it is we have those edges, and then we have our actual origin name servers, which are internal. And there in our origins, we have 9 right now. And we have Anycast running all the way through it. So even our own edges will use the shortest path Anycast to get to the origin that's closest to it.
That's interesting. So if you've got 14, you got 9, you're covering obviously the full world, but full world from a speed perspective is
it's good.
Relative.
It's good. So for example, gaps we have right now, Africa, we don't have anything in Africa now. We might spin up a point of presence down in South Africa at some point in the near future or in the Middle East. We're starting just now to spin up presence in South America. There are certain areas of networking, for example, the Southeast Asia area, which can be very complicated because they have a lot of countries that have very disparate routing, like lots of different companies that are small players that are providing routing. So you have lots of hops. So those are the kinds of areas where maybe you might have a slower response time. But generally, we've tried to build it so the vast majority of our customers, the folks that are using us, are getting good response times, regardless of where their customers are in the world.
And I'm assuming you're coloing all of your own hardware.
So no, we actually have a mix of on-demand bare metal, which is something that we've been able to start doing in the last few years, as well, I would say last maybe 5 or 6 years, as on-demand bare metal became more of a reality. Unfortunately, there's been a bit of a pullback in the industry from so it's been harder to get at that. We also do run managed hardware in some colo facilities, especially for our origins, because those are beefier machines.
My last question, and then we'll not the last question, but the question I'm catching up on. Victor was talking about, how are the developers working? So I imagine you have developers that are mainly for your self-service web, that kind of work. What other skills do your engineers have? I'm thinking more towards the back end, like the origin servers. What are they having? I mean, I'm assuming you're running bind or some variant of bind.
So we're not. I'm going to surprise. Yeah, this is what I'm going to surprise you with. We actually run an Erlang-based name server in our authoritative name servers. I actually wrote the first version of that. Was that 2015? I think is when I wrote the first version of it, and we launched that. I think it was in 2017, and we've been running that ever since. And then we use Go as a language to sort of transport messages around from our core central systems out to our various, what we call our zone servers on all these different edges. We use kind of like a hub and spoke design for getting messages out. And then we have Ruby and Rails for our web applications. So most of our engineers are comfortable in one or two, if not three of those. The Erlang is the one where we have the fewest people historically, but Erlang's actually had a bit of a resurgence thanks in part to Elixir and Gleam and other languages that were built on top of the Erlang beam. And so now we are seeing more and more people that are interested in the Erlang space. So that's kind of cool and fun. That's one of those areas where we encourage team members to go look at the code and try to understand what it does. And that's another thing that we get with generative AI that we couldn't get in the past. You can ask it to explain what's happening in this area of code, and it will do a pretty good job of explaining what's happening and the interactions with other parts of your code. I had our CTO who came to me and showed an example of how it taught him a particular code path inside of our Erlang systems, and he doesn't know Erlang. I thought that's pretty impressive that it was able to do that. And so, so those are the skills. And then, of course, networking skills. We have a number of our team members who are pretty good with understanding routing, BGP routing, understanding general system management, and so we use a lot of containerized systems, how to get those spun up, how to build deployment systems. And it's a big mishmash of skills. And we kind of hire generalists who are curious and who have been operating internet infrastructure, internet technology for a while.
So what you're saying is, if Erlang was good enough for telco switches, it's good enough for DNS?
Yes, absolutely. It works. It works quite well for it, actually.
That's very interesting. So with AI, you're saying, I agree with you, using generative AI to help explain something. Would it make sense to have it take those comments and stuff them in, or whatever it came up with as comments in the code? With that, or there's got to be a better way to do that? Because I don't want the comments in the code, but I want them tied together somehow.
It's a good question. I haven't really thought through one of the things that we lose, I think, in some cases with these AIs, because it's non-deterministic, is if we don't keep a history of the conversations that we've had, and if we're not evolving those conversations alongside the code, then we lose track of what it told us, because that history could potentially be gone. I think maybe in the future, as people get more comfortable using it and as the tools get better at retaining the history, we'll see more and more tooling that comes out of this is walk me through the history of this part of the code. And it will be a combination of what it told us in the past, maybe looking at GitHub repositories, for example. That's one way that what we started doing is when we get output from something like Cursor that says, here's a summary of what I did, we'll use that summary because it's often fairly clear and detailed, and we'll put that in sort of the issue or in the pull request. And so now we have a history of it inside of GitHub. And then we can use tools like GH, which allow you to connect to GitHub's API, pull that information back into Cursor, and we can say, okay, Cursor, tell me, where are we with this thing? And it can say, here's the history of it. Here's what's changed. There's going to be a lot of really interesting things that come out of just being able to connect this data together in tools that we have locally and have it run and operate fast enough and with a large enough context window that can actually give you a really good idea of the history of code and how it's evolved as well.
You bring up Cursor. Is that your only, or are you all testing a bunch of different ones?
I think right now a lot of us have settled on Cursor because it's kind of easy and it allows the use of different models, and we have the ability to put some controls on it that are applied across the organization. We've also experimented with Claude. We have some team members using Claude. They like that interface a little bit better, and they find that it does some things better. The biggest challenge with Claude is that their enterprise or their business pricing is very, very pricey, like $200 a seat per month. It's expensive. Whereas Cursor's far more, I say, cost effective and does pretty much, it's evolving just as well. And you get the whole IDE, right? Rather than this sort of command line interface. For now, we're letting team members use both to see where it goes. But it took us a while to get here because we were very risk averse. And so we first wrote the policies about what team members are allowed to do, make sure that we had the right configuration. So for example, they can't train the models in any way. Like we make sure that's all shut off before we get into, we don't send customer data into a model where it could potentially be trained on it. Like these are the types of things that we had to think about before. So we spent a good, I'd say 6 months to a year just thinking through the risks that we had, both for our customers and our own business, before we even said, okay, and we ran some trials as well from team members who were really into the technology to make sure that we tried to avoid pointing gun at foot and pulling trigger before we started deploying it more widely with the team members.
Well, even back then, say 6 months ago, for how much has changed in 6 months? Again, if we look back at 2025, I went offline in February, came back in June. That's when the agentic stuff came into play, which was a completely different thing. Now it's just, what's next? Things are moving. Can you remember, because you've been around long enough, because you talked about the 90s.
Yep.
Can you remember a time, and you went through the dot bomb, which you remember that. This does not look the same as dot bomb to me.
In terms of the potential bubble of AI?
Well, okay, I'm hesitant to say anything about a bubble because it doesn't feel the same as the sock puppet. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
It's moving so much faster. The hockey stick has been so much compared to basically just Web 2.0.
Yeah. Let's take it into two pieces, right? There's the technology itself, which is fascinating and it's interesting. It's evolving quickly. There's a lot of capital being put into it. So that's one side of it. And then there's the business side of it, right? And the business side of it maybe smells a little bit kind of like what happened in the .bomb or .com bubble, in the sense that companies aren't making anywhere near as much money as they're investing into this. And the level of investment is so much higher than we had it before. There's so much more capital. There's some really good podcasts that are talking about this right now. I think from the technology side, we've definitely made some interesting leaps. I also think we're not anywhere near done with it. There's a lot of researchers who feel that the generative AI path is maybe one direction, but that it's not actually going to get us to true AI, which is there's people that really want to get there. So they're taking different research paths. So I think we're really at the early phases still of this. But look at how much it's already it's changing a bunch of ways that people work, even now in its infancy. So I can imagine that in a few years, it's going to still look dramatically different.
I mean, this time last year, you probably only heard about, hey, somebody mentioned something agents. I don't know what that is. That was a year ago, man.
Yeah.
So with all these AI startups, we were talking about the business side of things. You've been running your own business now for 15 years.
Yep.
What reality check do you need to tell all of these new AI founders that think they're just going to cash out and be happy in the next year?
The reality is that most businesses fail. That's the reality of business. The vast majority of businesses in any type of business will fail. There's not a lot of moat for a lot of these businesses because essentially they're repurposing models and interactors that are provided by somebody else. The twist that they put on it, it won't exist as a moat. It'll just be a feature essentially for something else. That's actually one of the things that I am still looking to. I don't think the shoe has dropped in terms of the real revenue generators that are going to come out of things like Perplexity and ChatGPT, because none of them have really started touching what happens when they get into the buying process. I know ChatGPT is starting to. They started experimenting with Instacart, like, okay, can we do this? But apparently it's pretty awful right now. Well, the ones that figure it out and they where you are working with an agent or working with querying a model, and the buying process for whatever's you're buying happens sort of automatically in that flow. That's going to change a lot for a lot of businesses. And it can be good. It can help consumers who want things to be able to get the actual things they want instead of the stuff they don't want. Or vice versa, it can put a massive amount of power in a very small group of people's hands. And now all of a sudden they can move markets just by showing or not showing some product. And that's already, we're starting to see that. That was around your first question. You said, how does this affect us as a business? There is a very possible case of, okay, some business pays a lot of money to shut everybody else out in particular concepts. We're not even talking about search queries. We're talking about entire concepts. And that could consolidate power into a very small number of businesses, even more than we have today.
You mentioned moats, right? And I assume that you were referring more to those startups, businesses that are just wrapping, ChatGPT, things like that. But on the other hand, I feel that the moats are bigger than they ever were. In terms that, I dare somebody to come up with the idea to compete on model level, for example, right?
Yes.
Because, and when I say moat now, I don't mean technological moat, but kind of, you just need $1 trillion, kind of like good luck.
Yeah,
right?
for the biggest players, the moats are already in place, and they're just getting wider and wider. What I was referring to is more the moats that a lot of the smaller startups who are going into the AI space, and they're maybe trying to tackle a vertical. So the moat can't be AI for them. It still has to be the vertical. So in other words, if I'm going to start a business and my concept is I want to take AI and mix it with auto repair, I better be really, really good at auto repair. And I better have data and knowledge and experience with auto repair. And I need to then figure out how to, not AI, like the AI part of it, somebody else is solving that, right? You're going to be using their tooling.
I'm not even sure about that, to be honest. I feel that the situation is similar, like coming up with SaaS and going to reinvent every year, praying to whichever deity you pray that actually that's not going to be killed during the keynote, right? Because those, recently Cursor released their own model. And I have it so clear, kind of like, you are under real threat, kind of like Cursor can disappear like this, right?
Yeah.
If Anthropic decides just kind of like, hey, my model's kind of like my ID.
The risk of having a big player come and eat your lunch has always existed though, right? And you're right, with SaaS, it's been something where we are a perfect example of that. When DNSimple first started, none of the cloud providers were doing DNS. And then Amazon comes out with Route 53 and people were asking me, aren't you afraid? Like they're just going to destroy you. And my answer was, well, no, because this is just one of 500 other products that they're maintaining and building and growing. It will be good because it's Amazon. They're good at building distributed systems with AWS, but it will also be finite in the amount of investment that they're going to put in it. And it's going to be kind of generalized and generic. It's not going to be great for one particular audience or another particular audience because it's Amazon. They need stuff that is broad. And so it allows a niche provider like us just to have a focus and to evolve our focus because we can continuously move faster. We're kind of like the little mouse that's running around the elephant's leg. We're staying alive just by keeping on the move. And so I think if you're going to be a small business, regardless of who your competitors are, you have to be agile and nimble and keep moving. And again, when I look at some of the things that the tooling now is allowing us to do, when combined with good processes that don't get in the way, I think that allows us to continue moving in an agile fashion with the team that we have.
What is DNSimple moving towards right now?
Our biggest thing today really has been, we have a couple different types of customers that we see that are our sort of ideal customer profiles. We're really trying to double down on talking with them and seeing what they need. Like, what are the areas that they need us to focus on for them? And so in the next 3 to 6 months, our goal is essentially to take all this feedback we've gotten. I was interviewing customers over the last couple months and sort of figuring out what we could do with that and using that to help those niches operate their DNS better. And we'll keep doing the things that we've been doing. Most of our customers just want us to operate in a stable and consistent fashion. So we continue doing that while also trying to add on new things that they want. So it might be new record types that they want to see supported. It might be new ways of organizing domains inside of DNSimple. There's a lot of different things that people are asking for.
So a CEO that talks to customers.
I know, imagine, right?
That's just amazing to me. This conversation has taken me all sorts of different directions. Well, you can find DNSimple at DNSimple.com, and all of Anthony's contact information will be down in the episode description. Anthony, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
We hope this episode was helpful to you. If you want to discuss it or ask a question, please reach out to us. Our contact information and a link to the Slack workspace are at devopsparadox.com/contact. If you subscribe through Apple Podcast, be sure to leave us a review there. That helps other people discover this podcast. Go sign up right now at devopsparadox.com to receive an email whenever we drop the latest episode. Thank you for listening to DevOps Paradox.